Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Podcast number 11. My name is Mark Devlin, and would like to welcome you to Scotland's number one anti-nationalist podcast. It's going out live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, where you can subscribe, of course. What will we be talking about tonight, Phils?
Tonight I will be telling the story of the BBC's Sarah Smith, who has been hounded out of Scotland by cybernats.
And go ahead.
I'll be with special guest Brian Monteith about whether the pension debate has mortally wounded the SNP.
And I'll be trying to make friends with Nicola Sturgeon so that I can get money and power. All that plus Zoomer of the Week coming up shortly. Yeah, welcome back. As always, we always start this show with a big shout out to our donors. We have a lot of people who contributed to a crowdfund campaign to fund the podcast. And if you'd like to continue to help us keep the podcast going every week, please donate at the link below or go to majority.scot/donate. Also, I'd like to say a big, huge thank you to our friends at UK Union Voice. A lot of people watching tonight are from there, and it's good to have you with us. Of course, we're going out, as said earlier, on Majority's Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube pages. So please join us there every week. Niall.
Like, share, comment, give us a wee supercharge. We're already the number one anti-nationalist podcast on the planet, but let's get bigger and bigger and bigger. Turn the volume up so your neighbours can hear it. Chat their door, make sure they're listening and watching, and get us out there to as many people as humanly possible. Thanks very much, and get your comments in nice and early. We love to see your comments on the show.
So coming up, we're going to have a visit with Sturgeon's pal, including the Angel of Death, and we'll be talking to Brian Monteith about whether Sturgeon's time is up. But first, David's going to talk about his issue. On you go.
Indeed. So this week, the BBC's ex-Scotland editor, Sarah Smith, was in the news. In an article in the Times, Miss Smith, who is, of course, the daughter of the late and the very much missed John Smith, ex-leader of the Labour Party, Miss Smith told us that she is glad to have walked away from the bile, the hatred and the misogyny of Scotland's political culture. Miss Smith, of course, was formerly a big shot in BBC for coverage of Scottish politics. She has now taken a job as the BBC's North America editor. And rather insensitively in the article, it said that Miss Smith feels safer in gun-toting USA than she did in Scotland. So sad to say that Sarah Smith has now joined such luminaries as Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, who are seen as undesirables, for whom hatred is actively encouraged by Scottish nationalists.
This has been going on for a while, though, hasn't it? I mean, she had originally, there was a thing where she said that Nicola Sturgeon was enjoying the COVID. Yeah, how did that go, David?
Well, what happened then was Sturgeon spoke in Holyrood to say how disgusted she was about the suggestion that she could possibly be thought to be enjoying this, and she said that she'd never enjoyed anything less. Miss Smith, whereupon Miss Smith apologised and apologised again, but it didn't seem to be enough. And so,
well, has Nicola Sturgeon ever enjoyed anything? I mean, really, joyless individual.
There's your feelings.
She seems like a rather joyless individual, as I think we've said several times. So, Miss Smith has now seen fit to leave and get another job, and she's clearly a quality journalist, and she's landed a very big job. But interestingly, as soon as Miss Smith spoke out in the Times, we had the usual denial from our favourite Nats, including James Dornan, needless to say. James Dornan, with his customary tact and class, tweeted, "Oh, America would be the go-to place to escape all her imaginary woes then."
That's
accompanied
just
with
it's just
an Ivor
unreal. I
Exactly.
mean, how tone deaf do you need to be?
Absolutely right. I mean,
Unbelievable.
for someone to talk about misogyny, to complain about misogyny, and then to have James Dornan more or less saying, "Oh, don't worry, don't worry your pretty little head about it, sweetheart." Pretty much, it's just this disgusting.
You're just imagining it, pal.
Exactly, ridiculous. Classic gaslighting. Dornan went on to claim that Miss Smith was exaggerating the hate she had received. So he obviously thought it was just mild hatred, or maybe it's civic, fluffy, joyous hatred. I don't know. Which, of course, is an interesting line to take from an MSP who helped to ensure that Humza Yousaf's hate crimes bill came onto the statute book. Well, if as a blessing, of course, at least Dornan didn't use social media to inform Miss Smith that she would undoubtedly rot in hell, as he did to Jacob Rees-Mogg this time last year. So deeply, deeply unpleasant sentiments there. And there was another one from Phil Boswell, I think, Mark.
Yeah, I've got that here. He was replying to Roddy Dunlop, the QC, and he said, this guy Boswell said, "She's never been unbiased, Roddy, a traitor to the highest metric within journalism. No great loss, as another capped offer shall replace her, and the UK-controlled media machine grinds on." And I wrote above this, Scottish nationalism letting smug bigots call their fellow Scots traitors since 1934.
Oh, disgraceful. I mean, utterly disgraceful. What a reaction to someone who said, actually, I was subjected to some very unpleasant feelings and tirades. And these guys, one of whom is a current MSP, one who's an ex-MP, just piling, proving her point. This is absolutely appalling, absolutely disgraceful. So imagine, this is how we are now while we're still in the UK. Imagine how unwelcome pro-UK individuals, high-profile pro-UK individuals would be made to feel in an independent Scotland if this is how we're treated when we're still in the UK.
Well, I think that this is why we fight, because we know what will happen. Basically, all the talent, the money, and any person who is against, who doesn't want to be paid off by Sturgeon's government, then they all leave, and that's what happened in other countries. And what does that leave? It leaves a shell of a nation.
Yep.
And that's really what it does, and it leaves a bit. They like to say that the bitterness will, against the English, but no, that won't happen when we're independent. They've got this kind of idea of that, but you just need to look at Ireland, other and India and other places that are ex-colonial, and you see that bitterness still really remains. And they say, well, we're in this mess right now because you screwed us over 50, 100 or 200 years ago. It never ends, because the whole thing is focused on this historical grievance that doesn't really exist. It exists. The actual grievance, I think, exists right now in people's minds.
Yes, indeed.
100%.
I agree with that. And we know there's been at least one more notable victim of this really disgraceful nationalist fervour, and that's Ruth Davidson, whom I've been told, when I questioned why on earth would she choose to go to the House of Lords, and the answer is because she received like this daily, apparently, I think she lived in West Edinburgh, and she used to, with her young child, she has a young son, she used to be subjected to this sort of stuff when she was out shopping. So really, who can blame them? Who can blame people who decide they don't want to be bothered being subjecting themselves and their young families?
I mean, we were out in the campaign trail in the last election, and some guy, we were saying, I said to some guy who was passing by on a bike, we had a big billboard, and I said to some guy, we would want to do tactical voting, so if you are against the SNP, you should vote Tory here, and if you're against SNP there, you could vote for Labour. And the guy was like, vote for the Tories, I'm going to fight you. And he threw his bike down, and he's like, it's coming after me. And I'm like, well, it's not that bad, Yep. And Mary's like, well, we better get out of here. But that's the kind of thing. The people have been built up in this type of grievance and anger, and the politicians are profiting from that.
Yep. Absolutely right. So really quite shameful stuff, and it's a mark of how low Scotland really has sunk under these people, that you have young women being targeted by these appalling individuals and then being indulged by their leaders. That dreadful, a truly shameful episode, and the SNP should seriously be.
Is this James Dornan a troll with an MSP pass? Seriously,
Yep.
To then go after Sarah Smith,
yep,
proves her point.
Quite.
In fact, it proves it beyond any shadow of a doubt.
It emphasises our point, indeed. Yeah.
And he's weakly trying to walk it back. Well, imagine, maybe I should have used exaggerated. I mean, the guy's lost it. It.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a thing you see. I see today Andrew Wilson, who was one of the authors of the Growth Commission. He's like, "Oh, we're not like this, and we should have proper what's the word? People should have good behaviour in politics and all that." I'm like, it's your party, mate. You're the ones that are doing this by continuing this grievance and anti-English sentiment and anti-everything really that goes on day after day after day. And you think then you can't walk away from it and say, "Oh well, we should all be nice and friends now," when you've spent the past years insulting and debasing the other side. That's not acceptable. I say always that they need to own it. You say you can't get away from it. Don't give them the opportunity to divorce themselves from the chaos that they've created. They need to own it.
Could not agree more. So really quite a shameful episode. So very, very poor indeed.
It's terrible. Coming up,
I mean, it just typifies the debate. It typifies the toxic nature of the politics in Scotland, that she would rather live. If you ever think American politics is all cuddly, no, it's not.
Not quite.
American politics is dog eat dog, but over here, it seems to be worse. It's beggars belief.
Anyway, she's on the plane. There's a picture of her there to take off for Miami, leaving any woes behind. And good luck to her in a new job in the States. As viewers might know, I lived in the States for 8 years, and the politics there is fascinating. One thing I should say is that there's a bit of an issue with snooty British, I suppose, journalists, looking down on American politics, and it's but that's for another day. Anyway, wishing Sarah the best of luck, and moving on. Coming up, we're going to have Zoomer of the Week, of course, but first, are you a pal of Sturgeon? If so, life is sweet, but for the rest of us, not so much. Why is it? Oh, okay. All hail the Palocracy. So, hold on a second. We've seen this over the past few weeks, more and more, that Nicola Sturgeon's pals are getting special favours. First, it was Val McDermott, who was able to get David Goodwillie kicked out of the football club, her own football club that she had been a supporter of for many years. Despite the fact that he had been playing for Clyde for years. Now, no one at Clyde was a friend of Sturgeon or a pal of Sturgeon. And then, of course, we have Janie Godley, the award-winning comic. She likes to put herself, but also maybe say that she is a racist, ableist, a bully online, where she used words that no decent person would use in this day and age. And I was listening actually to her thing the other day, a recording of her when she was calling people all kinds of names, travellers and people of Indian descent. And you can know what those words are. But, as an adult, I would never use those words, and so we think that God, especially not for comedic effect. Yet Sturgeon turned around and said, "These things happen," and Janie Godley is being rehabilitated by the Times and other newspapers with her daily appearances in the Daily Record. And irrespective of whether she has cancer or not, she is pretty much a horrendous person online. Now we hear that Jean, I need to call her Jane, Calamity Jean has been given a free pass to a job in the Glasgow University.
Yep. It's unbelievable. It truly is. Well, it's believable. It's unbelievable that's happened, but it's very believable that this could have happened, yes.
And under this administration, indeed.
Yeah, of course. She sent 1,300 untested COVID patients into care homes.
Yep.
Right, savaging and annihilating care homes.
Yep.
It's despicable.
And wasn't there a suggestion that the people who were known to have tested positive in hospitals were nonetheless moved into care homes also, with the result that 4,888 people died in care homes and their deaths were all associated with COVID. That's almost 5,000 people.
Yeah, it should be a criminal investigation.
Absolutely
she should be stopped for taking any other roles. And this is unbelievable. I mean, surely this is damaging Glasgow Uni's reputation. Not that it can take much more, but surely the reputation is on the line. And she's went into a public health role.
Yeah, I know, it's quite shocking. The principal says, I'm extremely pleased to welcome Ms. Freeman to the University of Glasgow and what will be an important role that harnesses her expertise in health policy and community engagement. You know, when I see her on the TV, I just turn it off straight away.
Absolutely.
It should come. She should come with a government health warning because she's responsible for these deaths.
Almost
her own
5,000 deaths.
Criminal actions, and then she gets this cushy job, £100,000 at least, in the Glasgow University, and the Chancellor should be ashamed of himself for putting this person in charge of health policy. I mean, talking about community engagement, someone says here, you know, Jean Freeman, the Grim Reaper who oversaw the health of her loved ones, has been gifted the role of overseeing the welfare of the fluffy. I mean, what kind of thing is that? It's really quite shocking. I mean, we're getting quite a few good comments here from our followers. Please be sure to keep them nice and short. We try and mention them. Someone said there's incestuous Scotland, and that's part of the thing. You know, if you're a pal of Sturgeon, then you getting special favours and access to power? I think the answer with that must certainly
a resounding yes.
Yes.
I rather think so, yes.
Yeah. Some other good comments. Freeman should be in jail. The Grim Reaper is given a prize. She gets away with whatever she wants. No one challenges her. I think that's probably in relation to Sturgeon. Godley is despicable. I mean, all these people get protected by Sturgeon. She jumps into their defence. She doesn't make a video for anyone else, but she'll make a video for Janie Godley. Oh, these things happen, you know, just sweep it under the carpet, move on, none to see here. She's making up for it. She's giving the money back. She shouldn't have been given the job in the first place.
Absolutely.
Jean Freeman shouldn't have been given the job in the first place. We already knew she was a calamity before she was involved with the health system. We already knew that.
It's really shocking. And the other day I saw this thing. It was about as well about Judy Murray, who's another pal of Sturgeon.
Yes.
And it's all about this. I've actually been following this for years because one of our relations lives in Stirling, and it's about a housing development, like a housing tennis development that she's been trying to get built there over for at least a decade. Anyway, local people are against it. The Stirling Council rejected it. There are lots of questions about conflict of interest, and it just kept being rejected all the time. It was built in greenbelt land as well, so it's a nice big bit of green land. The residents, people of Stirling, didn't want to have anything to do with it. Anyway, it went all the way up, kept getting rejected, got to the Scottish government, and it went to the ministers, and of course they passed it through. Right, that's so against shocking. Every objection. We see all this, and here's the thing about I was reading about this. It's not just that she gets to develop the place. She gets £5 million allocation from Sports Scotland, as well for it. Right. You're like, it seems not right. So you're pal of. What happens if you're not a pal of Sturgeon? Right, we are not pals of Sturgeon. You know,
absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what happens.
You're not going to get any special favours, are we? I wouldn't want special favours anyway, because it always comes back to haunt you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're all in together. Again. We'd love to see who else applied for the job. Well, that's a good point as well.
Yeah. I bet that was an interesting shortlist.
There's a comment from Elaine, just the most recent comment. Can't believe no one's mentioned the child questionnaire. We've covered that ad nauseum.
Extensively,
We
yes.
can bring it up almost every time. Tell as many people as you know about that, and if you get any canvassers chatting on your door asking you to vote SNP or Green, you know what to say.
You know what to say to them.
I think we
know what
covered
to
that two podcasts ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did. Yep.
With the Glasgow
you
cabbie,
know,
aye.
That's right. And instead of
Get
what we're
back to the
getting,
whole Judy Murray thing. If I wasn't a pal of Nicola Sturgeon and I wanted to develop a tennis resort, whatever it is, there would be roadblocks thrown in my way, not taken away, not helped. I
Absolutely
would
right.
never get taxpayer funded help for that. No chance.
no,
But
there's no
she
chance
just
at
phones
all.
up Nicola. Any chance you can grease the wheels? My development, yes, done.
Yep.
And there's somebody appointed, and it just sails through. It's unbelievable.
Well, we see a lot of this in this kind of government tipping, the national government tipping the scales a little bit, because for example, in wind farm developments, there are hundreds of wind farm developments. I think it was over 200 wind farm developments that were rejected by local councils, by local people, and they kept going through the planning thing until they get to the Scottish government. And of course, what happens there is the Scottish government says, we need to do this because of our pals in the Green Party. And so they approve it. So they approve it against all the local objections. They're not into local government at all. You know, they cut the funding for local government, and they do this type of thing to these local communities. Don't want wind farms all across the country. It's terrible, really. And so whether you like wind farms or not, right, the fact that it should be that local people should have a choice on it, and not a government that's been driven by a green agenda, that's been driven by a few green MSPs that have no support whatsoever. I think that's perhaps really wrong, and it's just part of that. Again, it's the same if you're a friend of Sturgeon, like if you're Patrick Harvey or whatever, then you'll get as many windmills as you like. I'm sure there was another page in this, but anyway, I think we shall move on. Next up, we are going to be talking to a special guest, Brian Monteith, who is a former member of Scottish Parliament and the European Parliament, about his latest article in the Scotsman. So we'll be back in a second. Niall, you're going to take charge here.
Brian Monteith is an ex-MSP and a former member of the European Parliament. He runs Think Scotland, which is full of amazing articles. Check it out. And he's a Scotsman columnist. So, Brian, what was the article you titled this week?
Well, the purpose of the article was really to say that Sturgeon is on our way out. Now, I'm not saying he's going to disappear in the next week, that there's going to be some palace coup. It was really to just get people thinking that what we actually are seeing is the beginning of the end of, I think, Nicola Sturgeon being minister, because she used to be really quite boring. She used to be considered by the media a safe pair of hands, and really didn't have a great deal to say or upset people about. But certainly since she became leader in 2014, opinions have begun to change. And just recently, she's been an accident waiting to happen. She just, a week almost doesn't go by when she is not the story, some thing that her government has said, and instead actually doubles down and defends it. And we saw that, the best example, with the incident of cutting the bottom of school classroom doors, which she then started to defend as trying to help air circulation, and blaming it on councils. It would be their decision. I'm just making the money of it. So really what I was wanting to do was to get people to start thinking seriously about this, because one of the big things is really who would follow her. a real dearth of talent in the SNP cabinet and beyond that on the benches. And I think that's an important factor about what people will have to think about when they come to vote in May, because they can send a message to the SNP. But further down the line, because I still honestly think that Nicola Sturgeon will be fighting the next Holyrood election. I think either she'll leave or the SNP will in the end decide that she's a liability. And
You back? We're back.
Wow, what happened
did I
there?
go? I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, we had some technical issue there. I clicked a keyboard and everything went off.
Oh, wow.
Sorry
You
about
will.
that, fellas.
So
Could
let's
you repeat
just
that last sentence
jumping
then,
in.
Brian?
So, Brian, I wanted to run something by you, right? So,
Yeah.
I think the pension debate has mortally wounded the SNP. It's exposed the misinformation, disinformation, the lie, whatever you want to call it. So the SNP would have you believe that all the taxpayers in the country's national insurance payments conveniently go into this big pot in Westminster that's labelled everybody's pensions, which is plainly untrue. The pot doesn't exist, and any attempt to make this case is just wrong. If you're in receipt of a state payment at the moment, that's being paid by taxpayers working today. Likewise, when I become of pension age in 40 years' time, it'll be paid by taxpayers in the future. Is this the case? For once and for all, we need to put this to bed. I've only researched it for 5 minutes, and I've come to the answer, whereas the SNP couldn't have come to the answer in 8 years. I've spent 5 minutes on this, Brian. Am I right?
Oh, undoubtedly right. And I think this has been a serious strategic error by the SNP to raise this issue. But these things don't happen by chance.
Yep.
You know, the SNP is not a party that has over the years just made mistakes everywhere. It has carefully thought things through, and much of the time, unionists, self-regarding unionists who've been fighting them, have fallen for traps. I remember the issue of the question, and I think they wanted independence on the question, so they actually created a discussion about independence and saying, the idea that they were wanting it. But of course, this only got other people who are against them, anti-nationalists, saying, oh, we mustn't have independence on the... Well, of course, I think ultimately they didn't want it on the question either. Mm-hmm. And so I think, a lot of games are played. And what we're seeing here is a game that is all about creating a conversation. And the conversation is if we actually are having a referendum. That's the intention. It's to create this mood. We are having a referendum. It's just down the road and get us pensions. As if there will be some negotiation. There will be no negotiation about pensions. I'm pretty certain of that. But there won't be any negotiation because there'll be no referendum. But even in the event of there to be one and it to go badly and Scotland was to secede, the nature of the referendum, of any negotiation, would be to ask Scotland's representatives, what are you giving us back to the money we put into the pensions? That's the way around it would actually be. But the best thing is for us not to actually fall into these traps of endlessly want to discuss. We need to be discussing their record. Mm-hmm. And this is where the opposition have generally fallen down, because they don't stick to a theme. They don't stick to education. They quickly move on to drugs, or they quickly move on to housing. Listen, let's pick a few things that they're getting really badly wrong, that are really damaging the country, and focus on those, and don't let them off the hook, instead of falling for their agenda.
Mm-hmm. which is
Indeed,
a
I think-
scatterbrained approach to, there's a scandal there, a scandal there, a scandal there, a scandal there. That there's
Brian,
too many.
You're a
Yeah.
well-known pro-Brexit guy, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that Brexit is death to Scottish nationalism and to independence. What do you think?
Well, I think it should be death to them. And again, I think that's, I do try to mention in my columns issues such as if Brexit is done, it should make things difficult for the nationalists to argue how they would get back into the EU, although obviously Scotland's never been a member itself, how they would take Scotland into the EU, how they would actually remove all the benefits that by the time that anything might happen could have accrued from Brexit. And that's why if Boris and his cohorts were to really deliver changes that people could identify, such as cutting VAT on energy bills, which I think is a big mistake for there's a whole list of things that Boris and his cabinet could be doing that would deliver benefits to the people that politicians like Sturgeon and others to come along. We want to go into the EU. People would turn around and say, well, wait a minute, that means my VAT bill goes. If they'd done a better deal on fishing, which should have been possible, then you're creating a class of people, a group of people who are interested in not going back. And so the free ports issue, if you create 10,000 jobs around Grangemouth because of free ports, and then you're saying, oh, we'll go back into the EU, you've got those 10,000 workers and their families who are saying, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to go back into the EU, my job's at risk. This is actually part of politics, and we just don't have politicians in Holyrood who think like this. They defend Brexit, they don't advocate the benefits, they'll clap and cheer them when they arrive, but they're not working them, they're forced to deliver them, and they're not criticising the SNP for the Brexit benefits. And that's why it's not the killer blow it should be.
Yeah, I was on Twitter today, and some guy was saying, I hate Westminster, they've given us nothing, and it's just so corrupt and stuff. And I was like, well, what about the vaccine rollout? What about the furlough money?
Furlough, exactly.
And it goes on and on, a big list of stuff that people are actually benefiting from now. And the Scots Tories, because they're basically Remainers, they won't boost the Brexit part anyway, and anything that comes from Brexit. It's very frustrating. For that part as well. But I noticed in your article you said that a lot of nationalists say that Scotland is a colony of England, which is a bit strange considering we're a one country, the UK. But I noticed you said that Scotland would be the EU's colony.
Yes, I just don't think people fully understand the degree to which countries who are members of the EU have their decision-making closed down for them. And certainly when I spent my time in the European Parliament, it was self-evident that even the European Parliament has very little say in actually can't propose legislation. All it can do is block legislation that comes from the commissioners. So there's no doubt in my mind that actually what you do if you take a country into the EU is that you get their laws, and those laws are that countries have been able to agree to, and trades are made to get it. So whilst you have large countries like Germany and France who put a lot of money in, as the UK used to, you also get a lot of who have nothing at stake, but they will trade things that are not important to them to get what they want. So, for instance, on the Fisheries Committee, you could have members from Austria, a landlocked country, having a say in helping decide the policies for fishing in the North Sea. off the west coast. That's the ridiculousness of the EU, and Scotland would be putting itself back in the position of having Austrian parliamentarians help decide what happens in Scotland's fishing grounds. I just don't think that's acceptable. But we don't hear politicians articulating these messages.
No.
And that's what we have to do. And putting it shorthand to a EU colony, I think is the way to do it.
Well, that's very interesting, Brian. It's been good to have you on with us to talk about these issues. I wonder if you'd like to stay with us while we do move on to a Zoomer of the Week.
Sure.
And you're welcome to do your own ones in there as well. Okay, here we go. Right, okay, so as normal, every week we do a Zoomer of the Week, and we have, of course, every week we have a full stable of candidates, so many to choose from every week, and it turns out, actually, this time I'm going to be going first, and I wanted to, I could go on about, last week we talked quite a lot about the Times appeasement division, how the journalists are constantly appeasing nationalism. And I could go on about the spat I had with Alex Massey, where he said he wouldn't defend when he said that national independence was a respectable cause. And I could also go on about Kenny Farquharson, on one of their other columnists, who basically said in an article today that, yesterday, that if we didn't agree to his idea of balance, which means having a second referendum, that there would be violence. But instead, I mean, no, those two are just bad enough. Instead, I'm going to go with Fiona Rintoul of the Times. And this lady, I don't know anything about her background, but she is a total nutter. I can't believe that these articles are actually written in a decent newspaper. You know, I've said this before, if I was an editor, I'd be like, what? I'm not printing this. This is ridiculous. So here's this article she has. It's, she says, let's not pension off truth in union debate. In an age of political falsehoods, the public must learn to be resilient against misinformation. And not a paragraph later, it says, with the prospect of a second Scottish referendum, with the prospect of a second referendum and Scottish independence on the horizon. Like, what? When did that happen? I don't know. It's crazy. You know, one of these things about misinformation is that there's two different types of misinformation. One is no telling the truth, and the other is, so it's leaving.
I think it's got. One is not telling the truth, and two is not knowing you're not telling the truth. That was the difference. But I've seen David Leask and other journalists argue over, is it disinformation, is it misinformation? They don't know. They don't know.
Sorry, I disappeared again. I don't know where it was at. Another part of the article, she was talking about Russian disinformation. And, you know, she's like, oh, this Russian disinformation is a bad thing. You know, the Russian disinformation was actually by Russia and Iran to destabilize the UK by supporting Scottish nationalists, something she omits in the article. And I think that this is the thing. It's really quite shocking. She said in the article, of course, you may be completely against independence of a better idea. That's fine, let's hear it. And someone wrote, stay part of the UK. So that is the better idea. Let's get, these nutters, I've given these nutters a platform in the Times and in other newspapers is just really crazy as far as I'm concerned. But, it's the Times. We seem to have gone down the tubes. Next up, I wonder if you have anything to say about the Times, Brian.
Well, I'm not one to have a go at other newspapers. You never know; I might end up writing for one of them. But and of course, you will get pointing to me in the Scotsman, saying, "How can the Scotsman carry Brian Monteith?" I'm in favour of free speech and everybody being able to say their view. What I find strange is the focus can be in a paper, how it can actually present news. That's quite different from op-eds, opinion columns, where I think people should have platforms. But how news is presented, how it's curated, and to what extent issues are left out, I think that's where newspapers and particularly broadcasting can, because they can hold back information that gives you the balanced picture. So when I read things like The Independent and read what it has to say on Brexit, or if I read the Financial Times, I get a wholly picture from what I read in the Telegraph or the Guardian or the Express. And so we know those papers have their bias, and you need to, I think, be well read and read different newspapers, different sources, and come to your own conclusions, and not just take gospel from the one you think is on your side, because at times it probably will not be. So I've done my bit in the past. I've supported the Morning Star when I announced it. 2 more comrades for the movement. Okay. Births, marriages, and deaths column. Did they know, of course, that my 2 sons were not going to end up card-carrying communists like Jean Freeman was when I was a student.
Good point. She was indeed.
To add something to that discussion about Jean Freeman. Of course, getting a job at Glasgow, all well and good, but let's cast our minds back. Universities make mistakes. I do remember the time when Edinburgh University gave an honorary degree to Robert Mugabe, who was hailed as the great leader of his time. And by 2007, they were having to strip him of his degree from Edinburgh University. And the following year, the Queen removed his honorary knighthood. So universities have a bad habit. There's other examples of associating themselves who actually can become an embarrassment. And when we get into the stages of looking at what happened over COVID, like the Nike conference, like how care homes were treated, then actually having Jean Freeman on their books might be seen as a folly.
Yeah, I said last week we were talking also a little bit about nationalist influence into universities. We were talking about Stephen Gethin's at St Andrews and the fund that he'd started up, which put £35,000 of money from somewhere, whether it's a university or nationalists or the Chinese, doesn't really matter, but that money was to go to projects to basically fund nationalist projects inside the university, under the guise of being that people would have to create projects about Scotland's future, but it wouldn't be. I'm pretty certain that we're not going to wouldn't see stuff like, proposal. Here's my thesis. Can you give me some money? It's nationalism is a toxic force in Scottish politics, or Brexit kills Scottish nationalism. You can imagine straight away that those are not going to be acceptable to Mr. Gethin and his associates. But we see that's him in St Andrews, and then we're going to see what's her name, Calamity Jean in Glasgow University doing community outreach as well. So how much of that is also going to be funded as nationalist projects? I don't know. I mean, some of it, I suppose, is massaging reputation, right? You have a terrible reputation on one side, and then but I've been hired by a prestigious university, so
it's not prestigious anymore. It's not prestigious anymore.
Rapidly losing its prestige.
It's gone.
Right. Well, moving on. We're going to come to next. It's going to be Niall.
Yep. So this week I had a lot of choices to make. James Dornan here. He was on the list, of course he was, but he was late in the gate. He was late at the trap. So my first choice this week is Humza Yousaf. So his industrial levels of ineptitude have struck again. First we learn that a Glasgow man died having waited 40 hours for an ambulance a few months back. And now we learn the ambulance crews are being cut in Glasgow. I mean, this is just criminal. I mean, we've already had tragedies on the back of long waiting times. And the answer's not to wait longer. Believe me, it's not to wait longer. I mean, are people's lives a joke to this man? I mean, this is literally life and death for people. And it just defies all reason. It really does. For him, he is absolutely the Zoomer of the week. He's putting lives at risk. The NHS is crumbling away. And yet, inaction after inaction after inaction. The guy is
well, I mean, what is this thing
serial
with
incompetent.
with the ambulance crews? Is it really going to be one
night
ambulance
shift?
and night
That's
shift
what
for the
it
whole
says.
of Glasgow? I mean, that's just insanity.
It is
How are they
insanity.
going to deal with all the stabbings and and fights?
And that's
I mean, it's just not
Sunday
possible.
through to Thursday, I believe, or Sunday through to Friday. So you're getting it's one ambulance.
I
for
know.
a
I mean,
one.
guys, you know what was happening if you questioned this? You'd be told, why are you talking Glasgow down? Why are you talking down our ambulance service? I mean, of course, we're doing nothing. So, and so, I mean, I'll touch on that very same subject in my Zoomer of the Week. But yeah, that was absolutely right. The ambulance service is already at breaking point, and now it seems they just haven't even got people to cover night shifts. So where do you even start with that, gentlemen? Where do you even begin with that?
Where do you begin?
Well, it just seems to be part of just a destruction of just the services that you would expect in normal society. We want ambulances to arrive in time. It shouldn't be so difficult. The ambulance service has been running for 100 years or whatever it is, and we want people to empty the bins. It's not really that difficult to empty them. Is it really that difficult to empty them? I don't think so. It's not really difficult to empty the bins.
Well,
we don't want to have rats on the street. This is, these are basic stuff. You can virtue signal all you like about all kinds of other stuff, but at least do that after you've done the basics. That's the thing there. It's shocking, really. And we have the council elections coming up, and certainly in Glasgow, we have an administration there that is a disaster for the city. And with any luck, we can perhaps change it into some people who actually care about what's going on. We had Ewan Blockley on a few weeks ago. If you'd like to see his video, he was very good on the show. It was maybe two ago. Have a look at that. And there are some people out there who really do care, and they're being stymied by the Glasgow administration.
Yeah. It's just a wee comment coming there, and no wonder you're speechless. I mean, it defies all logic, all reason. It's beyond comprehension that this has happened. It really is. We need more ambulance crews, not less. I mean, come on. There's a person waiting 40 hours for an ambulance and then, subsequently died. So how can reducing the number? It's beggar's belief. It truly is.
Brian, what's your view on this?
The thing, if I could say, that strikes me here, that every time there's an election of politicians, that two things are going to be said, amongst others. One is the Labour Party is going to say, stop from privatising the NHS. That's and one is from the SNP, stop Labour privatising the NHS, because they're just blue Tories, red Tories, whatever.
Red Tories.
And the truth of it is that the SNP are such a mess of managing the health service. Let's not forget, this is not the fault of the nurses, the ambulance crews, the porters, all the people working their socks off. It's the way that the NHS is run, but it's been so badly managed from the top that people are going to start saying a private NHS couldn't be any worse. Just have my taxes cut and I'll pay an insurance premium. Because there's no way that you could get to the stage of having only one shift of ambulance drivers in American cities, because they're chapping at your door to pay, because it's a business. the customer is
Right.
king. And so what I see is the real threat to the NHS is saying they're the ones protecting it. They're not.
Yeah. Yes.
Quite
Spot
right.
on, Brian.
Yes, indeed.
That's
So, Humza Yousaf, is he going to be the Zoomer of the week? Let's see. Next up is going to be David. David, here we go.
Okay.
Who've got
Yes.
for us?
My nomination this week is Michelle Thomson, who is the SNP MSP for Falkirk East. Thank you, Brian. So Ms. Thomson came up with a classic let them eat cake style pronouncement this week. Apparently she was in hospital for a consultation, and Ms. Thomson could not wait to tell a waiting world, week after week I sit in the chamber whilst opposition parties besmirch the efforts and processes of the NHS, exactly like we were just saying. Having been referred, I, says Ms. Thomson, was taken quickly, x-rayed, ultrasound scanned and examined in record time, all clear, and I give grateful thanks. Well, isn't that just wonderful? Isn't that going to be a huge relief for patients who've been waiting 2 years for cancer care? Isn't that going to be great for people who haven't had any non-COVID related conditions treated in the last 2 years? You know, I'm only surprised Michelle didn't say, oh, is there a problem with waiting list? Why don't you just phone Bupa like I do? No problem at all, you know. But thankfully she didn't. But that's it. So I'm so glad that Ms. Thomson obtained good service this week, and we shall all sleep more easily in our beds as a result of knowing that. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
Well,
Great.
you know, as you know, I came back from the States to Scotland a few years ago, and I was a recipient of American healthcare, and you know, it's a great thing to be able to walk into a doctor's surgery and get seen within, you know, half an hour, and then get all your tests done within a day, and them to diagnose you and whatever it is straight up. It's unbelievable. Okay, and it costs you what? It costs you an insurance premium that's probably less than your taxes would be.
Yeah.
So a lot of people moan about the American health system, but you know, there was a huge debate about that, and you know, I think it was like 89% of people were happy with the health provider, because it's exactly that. You walk up, you get seen, and you're done. And I played squash, and these guys were saying, "Oh, I went for a hip operation." And I say, like, well, you know, how long did you have to wait? Oh no, I just basically went in 2 weeks, 2 weeks wait, and then I got it done, and it was the latest technology and all this type of stuff. And you're like, right, okay. And then you come back here and you can't even get a doctor's appointment. You know, you have to hover over the phone at 9 o'clock in the morning and be, well, you're going to be the first person to be in the line, and then maybe a nurse will call you back a bit later. Of course, these people are professionals and so on, and they're doing a hard job. I mean, why did it go to this? I don't understand. Maybe some people can talk about that maybe in the comments afterwards. But how did it go from the situation where you could actually just walk into the doctor's surgery and be seen, you know, with a reasonable wait, to this ridiculous phone thing where you don't, doctors what are they? Are they like, you know, gods or something like that? You have to, you know, go through the different layers of heaven to get to them or something. It seems insane to me. I don't know. Brian, what's your experience of that been?
Well, I have to say, 12 years or so, I actually have lived abroad most of the time because I've worked abroad, a bit like you and Mark. And you know, I've worked in Africa. And I once got off a flight in Uganda, and I'd done something. I got seen immediately in Uganda, and when I went to got seen immediately. And you know, my experience is in France. You know, if I wanted, as I sometimes did, to get a blood test for my high blood pressure, I would in Edinburgh. I would never hear afterwards unless I contacted them what was the result. It would take at least 3 days. At least 3 days. In France, a nurse would come to your house before, check your blood, take a blood sample, example, and by 5 o'clock you had the result. And my experience in France with the health service was absolutely miles ahead of what we have in the UK. And it's not a private system. It's differently, with different ways of paying and contributing to it, not just through your taxes. And they have more capacity. And the real problem in the UK is what we accept means that we have enough capacity. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough people in healthcare. But we certainly have plenty in admin. And sure, you need admin to manage people, but I think we need a better system, and it needs to be a different system.
Yes, there's quite too many managers in NHS. Westminster throws billions at it. Okay, all right. So I think we're going to wrap up the Zoomer of the week. It's as you're the guest, Brian. You get to choose. Will it be Humza Yousaf, Michelle Thomson, or Fiona Rintoul?
Oh, the tension.
Oh, my friends, Mr. Massey and Fiona can sleep easy. I won't be nominating them. Some of these tweets. And while Michelle has given it, I would actually give it to James Dorman. So, because I honestly think that is the sort of behaviour that really politics. I mean, you can have politicians who are numpties and make fools of themselves. It's malevolent, and I think that's the cancer we really have to cut out of social media, and that's the sort of thing the SNP whip should be stepping on. It's sort of that the SNP leader, the First Minister, should be picking up the phone on. If she wants to say she's concerned about women's rights, then that's the sort of misogyny she should have been calling out.
Here.
Yes, well said. All right, well, thank you, Brian, for generously becoming our guest tonight. I think we're going to wrap up with thanks in general. We're going to do a new thing here. First of all, we're going to thank all you, Mary. And there she is there. Oh, there you
there's
are.
Mary. How are you?
Doing all of our chat, doing all of our chats, and doing all the behind the scenes work. Thank you, Mary, and we appreciate your work. Once again, a big thank you to all of our donors. We couldn't do this without you. If you would like to continue to support the podcast, we do have quite substantial running costs now that we're going out to quite a lot of people. We appreciate if you any type of donation at all. Huge thanks to UK Union Voice for allowing us to distribute on their platform. We have another one coming up next week, so we should be able to reach even more people, especially through Facebook. So thanks to them, Niall, and also thanks to Niall and David.
No, thanks very much, everyone, for watching. It's good night for me.
Yep, it's and thanks very much, Brian, for coming on. Excellent to have your input, and I know that the comments here are saying that. Excellent work in the papers, Brian, says Richard Tyler. So there you go. So terrific to have you on here, and well done, Mark and Mary. Well done, Niall. And what a pleasant evening it's been for all of us.
Yes.
Great. So I'll leave you with a new thing, which is the thought for the week. They actually think there's going to be a second referendum. Poor bastards. We'll see you next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Cheers, guys.